Okay, pakikinggan natin at panonoorin ang isang video na recorded video ito. Actually, noong nakaraang Sabado pa ito ini-stream ng sponsor ng Luzon Reformed Baptist Churches Association in Luzon. At ito ay pinangunahan ng Heritage Church doon sa Quezon City, no? Isa sa bagong church ngayon na bagong kasama sa Reformed Baptist na iglesia. Ang totoo, mula sa isang malaking grupo na humiwalay at nagsimula ng gawain doon. At si Pastor Noel Espinosa, para sa mga hindi pa nakakakilala sa kanya, siya po ay isa sa mga iginagalang na pastor sa Reformed Baptist Community. Siya ay pastor ng Grace Baptist Church of Los Baños for many years, no? Founding pastor of the church, and even at this time, siya pa lang din ang pastor doon. At the same time, siya ay principal ng Grace Ministerial Academy, at kung saan doon ako nag-aral, si Pastor Proy, doon din siya nag-aral. At gayon din, sa kasalukuyan ay patuloy po siyang ginagamit ng Panginoon sa larangan ng mga Reformation Conference. At salamat sa Diyos sapagkat mayroong pwede tayong mapanood ngayon mula sa Kanya, at sana makatulong din ito sa ating lahat. Now, yung kanyang video ay mga 38 minutes lang, pero merong kasama may question and answer doon na ilalagay na rin natin, kasi may mga during the stream ay may nagbigay ng mga tanong, pagkatapos ay sinagot niya rin yung mga tanong. So, pero hindi natin papanoorin na yung mga huling bahagi dahil mauubos ang oras natin. Umabot yata ng 3 oras yung na to, no? Itong mismong file na ito, kaya we will cut it hanggang siguro mga 1 hour para mapanood natin. So we will not be entertaining questions here, no? Kasi wala na tayong time para dyan. So baka naman yung ilan sa mga tanong natin ay masasagot na rin nung mapapanood natin mula sa kanya. So ibigay natin ngayon ang ating sarili at panunood para sa isang video at mula kay Pastor Noel Espinosa.
Pagbati sa inyo mga kapatid at mga kaibigan sa pangalan ng ating Panginoong Hesukristo. Sa darating na 9 ng Mayo, tayo ay gaganap ng isang mahalagang tungkulin bilang mga mamamayang Pilipino, at yan ang ihalal ang mga pinuno ng ating bayan. Ngunit hindi maiwasan na tayo ay magtanong bilang mga mananampalataya, mayroon bang makakristyanong pag-iisip o desisyon na may kinalaman sa halalan? Kaya ginaganap itong talakayan na ito upang mabigyan natin ng pag-iisip ang ganitong katanungan. At ang ating paksa ay binigyan ko ng titulo na Vote 2022, Not Devil or Messiah. Siguro sa titulo pa lamang ay gusto kong maipakita ang balanse na dapat nating panatilihin sa ganitong pag-iisip. Ang ating saligang batas ay nagmamandato at kumikilala sa karapatan ng mga mamamayan ayon sa Article 5, Section 1. Sa huling pangungusap na lamang aking babasahin, no literacy, property, or other substantive requirement shall be imposed on the exercise of suffrage. So all citizens na nararapat at kwalipikado, 18 years old and above, and with the right residency, na ay makaboboto as long as you are a registered voter sa darating na 9 ng Mayo. At kung isipin natin ang tungkulin o ang kalayaang ito, dalawang bagay ang gusto kong panariwain natin. Voting is a democratic liberty. Kalayaan ito sa isang demokrasya. At kapag sinabi natin na ito ay kalayaan sa isang demokrasya, it means that there are genuine choices. May talaga naman tayong pagpipilian. At pasensya na doon sa hindi ko na ilagay ng mga larawan ng mga kandidato na iboboto ninyo. Ngunit ito lang ang espasyo na kailangan ko. Ngunit dito pa lamang makikita natin na meron tayong pagpipilian. Isalungat natin ito sa mga totalitarian systems, sa mga sistema o lipunan na sinusupil ng mga diktador o ng mga partido na may monopolya ng pamamahala. Like in communist countries, there is no genuine choice, and this therefore is a liberty that we need to cherish. But apart from being a liberty, let us consider this a patriotic duty. The act of putting or casting your ballot into the ballot box does not seem to be very revolutionary compared to taking up arms against the government. Ngunit ang pagboto ay isang sagradong pamamaraan, kaya angkinin natin ito na tungkulin. May mga nakakausap ako na sinasabi nilang hindi na lang sila boboto sapagkat tiyak na ang resulta. Ito po ay maling pag-iisip. Ito ay tungkulin natin bilang mga nagmamahal sa ating bayan. We exhibit our love of country in choosing our leaders according to conscience. Paano ka makapagsasalita laban sa mga patakaran na hindi mo sinasang-ayunan kung hindi ka naman nagpasya kung sino ang gusto mo na magiging leader o pinuno ng ating bayan. Kaya pagbalansehin natin ito, kalayaan ito na ating karapatan, ngunit tungkulin din natin bilang mga nagmamahal sa ating bayan. Ngayon sasagutin ko ang isang malimit na katanungan ng mga mananampalataya. Do we need a Christian president? May mga nagpapanukala nito na para maayos ang bansa, kailangan nating iluklok ay ang isang mananampalataya sapagkat sinasabing siya ang kakasihan ng Diyos at nasa panig niya si Jesucristo. Sa makatuwid, mabuting Kristiyano ang namamahala. Ang ganitong posisyon ay hindi pinag-iisipan ng gusto ang turo ng salita ng Diyos, lalo ng bagong tipan. Minsan ay tinanong si Jesus ng mga nasa magkabilang panig, ang mga Pariseyo na mga naghihimagsik sa Roma at ang mga Herodians na mga loyalista na mga Romano. Tila naipit dito si Jesus ng kanilang tanungin, dapat bang magbayad ng buwis sa mga taga-Romano? At ang kanyang naging sagot is, we can only say the answer of wisdom or of genius when he said, render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's. Now, ang sinasabi nito ay pagkilala, the recognition of two realms or kingdoms. Nariyan ang kaharian o larangan ng kay Caesar na siyang emperador ng Roma noon, at dahil meron silang barya na ginagamit nila at sila'y nakikinabang, ay dapat silang magbayad rin ng kanilang nararapat na buwis sa mga namamahala. Gayunpaman, hindi nito tinatanggal ang mas mahalagang pagpapailalim at pagpapasakop sa kaharian ng Diyos. What we see here is distinction, or even you may say separation of jurisdictions. No, it doesn't mean that they are in contention. It only means that they are of distinct realms, of distinct jurisdictions. Iba ang kanilang mga misyon. Ngayon, kung tataguyod natin ang ganyang katotohanan, may isasagot natin dito sa tanong, do we need a Christian president? Ang kamalian nito na nagsasabing kailangan ng Kristiyanong presidente ay pagkakalito sa kaharian ng Diyos at sa kaharian ng tao. Hindi nila binibigyan ng pagkakaiba. At hindi lamang yan, ay merong tinatawag na conflation of saving grace and common grace. Pag sinabing conflation, pinag-isa mo, pinagsama mo. At ang saving grace ay tumutukoy sa biyaya ng Diyos na nagliligtas. Ang common grace ay mga pabor pa rin ng Diyos sa lipunan, ngunit hindi nagliligtas. Pero dahil pabor pa rin sa mga makasalanan, tinatawag pa rin na biyaya. Ang mga usapin ng politika, ang pamamahala, ito ay nasa larangan ng common grace o karaniwang biyaya. So government is not about safeguarding justice, or rather, government is about safeguarding justice in society, not gospel mission. Hindi yan ang misyon, hindi yan ang mandato ng pamahalaan. wala siyang pakialam sa pagsulong ng ebanghelyo. At sa kabilang panig naman, church mission is about the gospel and discipling. Yan ang mandato na iniwan ng Panginoong Hesus sa kanyang iglesia. Therefore, the church is not about political involvement. Kaya dito makikita natin na may dalawang pagkakamali sa dalawang panig. Ang isang pagkakamali is when government adopts gospel mission. Parang maganda sapagkat kanyang isinusulong ang ebanghelyo, ngunit hindi ito para sa kanya. And we have centuries of historical corroboration that such a government will become a persecutor of those who do not conform to any state, church, or religion. Yan ay pagkakamali. Ang ikalawang pagkakamali ay sa panig ng iglesia. When the church is politicized, it only betrays that it is a church that has lost its gospel message. Kung ikaw ay iglesyang pinagkatiwalaan ng napakagandang mensahe ng ebanghelyo, bakit mo isusuko yan para sa mga mensahe na pangpolitika? Kaya ang sagot dito sa Do We Need a Christian President ay ugat natin dito sa paghihiwalay ng kaharian ng Diyos at kaharian ng tao. At dagdag pa riyan, tandaan natin na ang iglesia ng Bagong Tipan ay hiwalay na at iba na sa bansa at sa estado. The New Testament church is now separate and distinct from the nation state. Iba ito sa Israel. In the Old Testament, Israel is both covenant nation and covenant church. But that is unique to Israel. Ito ang maling hermeneutics ng marami sa pagkuha nila ng mga pangako sa Israel at pagkatapos ay gagamitin nila at iaangkop sa Pilipinas na hindi naman ito para sa Pilipinas. 1 Chronicles 17:21 records the thankful prayer of David upon receiving the Davidic covenant from Yahweh. He says, "And what one nation in the earth is like your people Israel, whom God went to redeem for himself as a people, to make you a name by great and terrible things," etc. Ipinapakita nito na tanging Israel ang bansa na tinubos ng Diyos mula sa pagkakaalipin ng Ehipto at walang ibang bansa na katulad ng Israel. Hindi natin maaring iangkop ang mga bagay na pang-Israel sa lumang tipan at pagkatapos ililipat natin sa ating bansa. The New Testament church is now a spiritual community. That's why it requires regenerate membership. Ang ibig sabihin ng mga miyembro dapat ay ang mga tumanggap ng kaligtasan kay Kristo sa pamamagitan ng kapanganakang muli ng banal na Espiritu. That is not true of the nation state. The nation state is not a covenant church. Therefore, there is no regenerate citizenship. There is no requirement na ang mga mamamayan ay dapat na ipinanganak na muli. Now, maliwanag ang magiging sagot nito sa katanungang do we need a Christian president? Today's nation state does not require regenerate leadership. Hindi kailangan ang nasa liderato ay ipinanganak na muli para magampanan nila ang mandato ng pamahalaan. We need leaders who are just and not necessarily Christian, because the mandate of the state is justice, and we need rulers who are just, but that does not require that they are regenerate. Ang sabi ni Apostol Pablo sa pinakamaliwanag na teksto tungkol sa mandato ng pamahalaan, Romans 13:4, it is a minister of God, that is, the government is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath on the one who practices evil. Inulit-ulit ni Pablo na ang pamahalaan, ang namamahala ay ministro ng Diyos. Ginamit niya ang salitang diakonos, ay siya ay gumaganap ng kalooban ng Diyos. Hindi niya ito alam, hindi niya ito namamalayan, ngunit katotohanan pa rin na kanyang ginagawa ang ayon sa katarungan kung siya ay iniluklok sa pagkaliderato ng isang lipunan. Now, you must remember that when Paul wrote the letter to the Romans, the emperor of Rome was a wicked man in the person of Nero. And yet, Apostle Paul, as far as theology is concerned, sinabi niya na ang namamahala ay mga lingkod ng Diyos para sa katarungan. So the Christian voter is not required to vote for a Christian candidate. Huwag mong isipin na dahil Kristiyano ka, titingnan mo kung sino ang Kristiyano sa mga kandidato at siya lamang ang iyong iboboto. At mas lalong mali, it is wrong for the church to endorse, much less field a candidate. Nangyari ito ng mga nakaraang halalan na ang mga iglesia ay nilagyan ng pressure na para bang may isang Kristiyanong kandidato na tinawag ng Diyos, binigyan pa nila ng propesiya, pagkatapos na talo, ay anong ibig sabihin? Natalo ang Diyos, natalo ang kalooban ng Diyos. Ipinapakita lang nito ang kahungkagan ng anumang panukala na kailangan ang nasa pamahalaan ay Kristiyano. As citizens, it is right, however, to participate. In fact, I would say even passionately in elections. Maring may sinusuportahan kang kandidato at gusto mong isulong ang kanyang pagkakandidato, walang mali sa ganong gawain at ito ay kabilang sa ating karapatan bilang mga mamamayan. Huwag lang nating isipin na dapat Kristiyano ang namamahala para maging maganda ang ating boto. Now, how should we evaluate our vote? Here, we need to understand the biblical teaching in wisdom literature. Wisdom literature is not about promises, it is about how providence works. And here, Proverbs 29:2 says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked rule, the people mourn. Pinapakita nito, the ruler's character makes a difference. At hindi tayo nagwawalang bahala kung sino ang mailuluklok sa pamamahala because it makes a difference whether the one in the government is righteous or wicked. And by the way, this is righteous not in justification sense, this is righteous in wisdom sense of social righteousness. And then in the New Testament, Apostle Paul instructs Timothy to instruct the church in Ephesus. First of all, then I urge that requests, prayers, intercessions, and thanks be offered on behalf of all people, even for kings and all who are in authority, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life in all goodness and dignity. Dito ipinapakita that the character of rule bears on the church. May timbang sa iglesia. Kung masama ang namamahala at naging mang-uusig ng iglesia, ay maaapektuhan ang gawain ng iglesia. Samantalang kung may kapayapaan at may kalayaan, ay mas madali para sa iglesia ang gawin ang kanyang mandato. So the character of rule bears on the church. So our vote is not a matter of indifference or just partisanship. Huwag kang walang bahala sa iyong gagawing boto. Isang boto lang yan, pero makakaambag yan sa bilang na sana'y bilangin sa COMELEC at magkaroon ng resultang maganda para sa ating bayan. Huwag kang bumoto lamang dahil sa partisanship or that partisan is a political party or ang kandidato ay kaprobinsyano mo o kakilala mo. Hindi yan ang mga dapat na pagbatayan natin. Let us not be apathetic in our exercise of vote. Now, kung tingnan natin ang botohan dito sa Pilipinas, Filipinos love elections. There is no doubt about that. In fact, we register very high voter participation. Ikinaiinggitan tayo ng ibang mga demokratikong bansa sapagkat mayroon man silang botohan, ay kakaunti ang mga talagang nakikisangkot sa botohan. Noong linggo lamang ay nagkaroon ng botohan sa France, a run-off elections, and there was very small percentage of participation. Ganyan ang sa maraming bansa. Pero dito sa Pilipinas, hindi problema yan. Filipinos love to vote. But we need to take into account that the character of the elections in the Philippines ay dalawang extremes. Elections have fiesta atmosphere. It is often celebrity driven. Kaya nga sa maraming kampanya ay tumatawag ng mga celebrities sa kanilang pag-asa na ang mga tagasunod ng celebrity ay iboboto kung sino man ang endorsohan ng celebrity na iyon. At ito'y mangmang na pagpapasya kung ikaw ay bumuboto ng dahil lamang sa celebrity. Sa kabilang panig ay nandyan ang mga militants, and they include many Christians who see issues as black and white, na parang lahat ay mali sa isang panig na kanilang sinasalungat at lahat ay tama sa panig na kanilang sinusuportahan. So black and white issues, kaya't napakalaganap ng protesta dito sa ating bansa na halos hindi na tayo makasulong dahil maya't maya ay protesta. Now, one thing that we should remember and warn is that political involvement can become so engrossing that it blurs gospel issues. Masyado tayong masangkot, ma-involved sa mga bagay na politika na hindi masama, ngunit kung labis ang ating pagbibigay ng sarili sa mga bagay na yon, ay napapalabo natin ang mga usaping pang-ibanghelyo. Kaya dalawang bagay ang gusto kong pakalinawin natin sa anumang maging resulta ng botohan sa darating na halalan. Even the worst candidate, if victorious, will not be the devil. Now, in saying that, I recognize that there are leaders who prove destructive. Tingnan nyo lang ang kasaysayan, tingnan nyo lang ang kasalukuyan, ay nandyan ang mga lider na naging mapaminsala sa kanilang sariling mga kababayan, sa lipunan o maging sa buong mundo. Adolf Hitler, hindi ko na kailangang sabihin ang pinsala na kanyang ginawa sa mundo ng dahilan sa World War II. O sa ating panahon, ang pinuno ng Russia na si Vladimir Putin ay nagiging sanhi ng paghihirap at ng mga krimen ng digmaan doon sa Ukraine. Ay hindi natin mapapawalang bahala ang katotohanan na kapag maling lider o masamang lider ang nailuklok, maaari siyang maging mapaminsala sa kanyang lipunan. So Christians, I repeat, must not be apathetic voters. Huwag nating maliitin ang ating boto. We reject this popular idea of Vox Populi, Vox Dei. Ibig sabihin niyan, the voice of the people is the voice of God, often used in association with the democratic principle, but it is wrong. Hindi komot pinili ng mayorya, ang mayorya ay tama. Kahit sa Biblia, alam natin ang kaso ni King Saul na pinili ng bayan, ngunit sa pagpili nila kay King Saul, ang sabi ng Diyos ay hindi si Samuel ang kanilang tinanggihan, kundi ang Diyos mismo ang kanilang tinanggihan. Saul proved not to be the man after God's own heart who David would be after Saul. So there is the case of the voice of the people contrary to the will of God. So beware of misapplication of divine sovereignty. May mga nag-iisip, soberano ang Diyos, inuman ang maluklok, yan ay ayon sa pahintulot ng Diyos. Wala tayong magagawa, kahit sino man ang iboto natin, kahit sino man ang suportahan natin, ay maluluklok kung sino ang ipahintulot ng Diyos. May tama sa sinasabi niya, mali lang ang kanyang pag-aangkop. Hindi ito dapat magresulta sa walang pakialam sa boto, o wag tayong makisangkot, o wag tayong magsulong ng kandidatura ng ating iniisip na pinakamahusay na maging pinuno ng bayan. In God's providence, however, Tandaan natin ito. Kung masama sa iyong palagay ang maging resulta, ibig bang sabihin na kalampas sa providensya ng Diyos? No. In the providence of God, people get the leader they deserve. Sometimes as divine judgment. When God will judge a nation, as it is said, He often sends them wicked rulers. At kung ganyan ang mangyari sa ating bayan, ay walang ibang dapat sisihin kundi ang bayan sa kanyang kasalanan at sa kamangmangan ng marami sa paggamit ng kanilang pribilehiyo at kalayaang bumoto. Ngunit hindi dyan natatapos, maaring ito ay mangyari as spiritual challenge upang pukawin ang mga iglesia, pukawin ang mga mananampalataya. Kung sila'y nasa ilalim ng masamang pamamahala, makababalik tayo sa kasaysayan at doon ay makikita natin kung paanong sa ilalim ng mga masasamang pamamahala, mga masasamang hari, ngunit yumabong ang simulaing Kristiyano. Tandaan natin, even if a bad candidate wins, it is not the end of the gospel cause. It does not end the gospel cause. Hindi nito tinatapos ang simulain ng ebanghelyo. Ngayon, baliktarin natin, even the best candidate, if victorious, will not be the Messiah. Kahit pa ang sinusuportahan mong kandidato, halimbawang manalo, huwag mong isipin na naglukluk ka ng isang Mesiyas. Hopes placed in mortals die with them. All the promise of their power comes to nothing. So, that's Proverbs 11 verse 7. Hindi natin inilalagay ang pag-asa natin sa isang taong mortal, gaano man siya kagaling. Hindi niya malulutas ang suliranin ng sangkatauhan. Kaya bantayan natin, watch political promises couched in messianic terms. Mamaya may bibigay akong halimbawa niyan. Ngunit bantayan ninyo ang mga nagsasabing wala ng kahirapan, wala ng korupsyon, wala nang ganyan at ganitong kasamaan, o di naman kaya ay ibibigay ng gobyerno sa inyo ang lahat ninyong pangangailangan. At kung ganyan ang mga naririnig mo, ay huwag mong paniwalaan. Maaaring suportahan mo pa rin ang kandidato, pero huwag mong paniwalaan na siya ang magiging mesiyas ng Pilipinas. No mere human leader can eradicate all human ills. Why? Because whoever the leader is, sin will remain. Mananatili ang kasalanan at ang kasalanan ng sanhi ng lahat ng suliranin sa individual man o sa lipunan. So, sa mga Kristiyano, ito ang aking babala. Beware of political passion that outweighs passion for the gospel. Nalulungkot ako kung minsan na nakikita ko ang mga Kristiyano na involved sila sa mga political issues, handa silang makipag-rally, handa silang makipagkampanya, ngunit pagdating sa pag-iebanghelyo ay napakakupad nila. Hindi ito ganito dapat ang mananampalataya kung nakikita natin na ang talagang pag-asa ay wala sa politika, kundi sa kaharian ni Jesucristo at sa ating Panginoon at tagapagligtas. Now, it is right to work for justice now. Tama na magkumilos tayo para sa katarungan ngayon, kung anong magagawa natin. But the ultimate hope is in Christ. Ang lubos na pag-asa natin ay na kay Kristo. That is why His second coming is called the blessed hope. Looking for that blessed hope. Not a candidate, but the glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior Jesus Christ. So we vote, remember, not for a heavenly realm, but simply for justice in the nation. Yan ang gusto nating resulta sa ating pagboto. Hindi naman tayo bumoboto na bumaba ang langit dito sa Pilipinas na hindi mangyayari. Gusto lang natin ay simpleng katarungan sa ating bansa. And speaking of messianic political promises, listen to this.
At kapag nakamtan natin itong tagumpay ng pagkakaisa, Makikita po natin ang ating mga kababayan na makabalik na sa kanilang trabaho, na may pera ulit sa kanilang bulsa, na mapakain nila ang kanilang mga anak, mapaganda nila ang kanilang tinitirahan, at kaya na nilang magbayad sa lahat ng mga pangangailangan na pang-araw-araw. At bukod sa lahat, na makapagbigay tayo ng pag-asa sa bawat isa na ang ating magiging kinabukasan ay mas maganda sa ating pinanggalingan.
No, just to be fair, ito rin ang isa.
Hindi na kailangang mabaon sa utang ang mga nawalan ng trabaho. Sa halip, sa komunidad niya mismo, gobyerno ang magbibigay ng trabaho. Ang mga nagbuhos ng ipon sa maliit na negosyo, makakaasa sa ginhawang dala ng pagsisikap. Dahil gobyerno mismo ang mag-uugnay sa kanila sa merkado. Wala nang katutubong mapipilitang magharang ng katawan sa bulldozer. Dahil makakahugot lang ng likas na yaman mula sa lupa kung may basbas ng komunidad. Ang maralitang tagalungsod, hindi na kailangang magbarikada pag may demolisyon. Dahil sisiguruhin nating matutugunan ang kanilang pangangailangan sa bagong tahanan ng kanilang mga pangarap.
Now, you may support either of those two candidates or perhaps another candidate. Nothing wrong with that as long as you do not believe their messianic promises. Ito ang aking payo sa mga Kristiyano bilang mga mamamayan. There is due honor to government by doing civic duties in society. Kung magkaroon na ng resulta ng halalan at ang maluklok ay someone you do not like, you do not want to be president, but we have our civic duties to accomplish. And whoever is in place, I'm sure it will not be worse than Nero was to the time of Paul, and yet Paul was willing to recognize the hand of God behind government in his time. So let us perform our civic duties. On the other hand, absolute dependence on government is worldly conformity. Unfortunately, this is what most candidates will seek to make of the voters, make them dependent on government, at hindi ganito ang dapat na diwa ng isang mananampalataya bilang isang mamamayan. Ang ating pagsalalay ay nasa Diyos at sa kanyang pagpapala, hindi sa ibibigay sa atin ng pamahalaan. Ang pag-asa lamang at pagsalalay sa pamahalaan ay makamundong pakikiayon na sinabi ni Apostol Pablo, "Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Yan ang ating pakaisipin, maging sa paggamit natin ng ating kalayaan at tungkulin na maghalal ng mga pinuno, hindi tayo makamundo sa ating pag-iisip. Vote your conscience in these elections, but put your hope in the gospel. By way of concluding thought, this is Charles Colson. He has spent a lot of time in the corridors of power as legal advisor to the disgraced US President Richard Nixon nang sumambulat ang Watergate scandal noong 1970s. Siya ang unang nakulong, ngunit siya ay naligtas, naging lider na mananampalataya, at marami siyang isinulat na ginamit niya ang kanyang karanasan sa kapangyarihan nang siya ay nasa kapangyarihan, at isa rito ay kanyang sinabi, "Today's misspent enthusiasm for political solutions to the moral problems of our culture arises from a distorted view of both politics and Christianity. too low a view of the power of a sovereign God, and too high a view of the ability of man. It ignores the consistent lesson of history that shows that laws are most often reformed as a result of powerful spiritual movements, not vice versa. I know of no case where a spiritual movement was achieved by passing laws. Kaya sa ating paghalal sa darating na halalan ay isipin natin na hindi tayo naghahalal ng isang gaya ng aking sinabi sa aking titulo ay isang not devil or Messiah. Ngunit seryosohin natin. At gusto kong iwanan kayo ng isang malayang salin ng himakas ng isang bayani. Kayong mga babangon sa pagbubukang liwayway, huwag din niyong kalimutan kaming mga ninuno na mabubuwal sa kadiliman, sapagkat hindi lahat ay natutulog sa gabing madilim ng ating inang bayan.
Alright. Sige, dyan po nagtatapos ang ating session. Okay, marami po salamat, Pastor Noel Espinosa. Tayo na po ay nasa section na po natin na tayo ng Q&A. So pwede na pong mag-send ng mga questions dito sa Zoom. Pastor Noel, pwede nyo na din pong on ang inyong camera at mag-unmute. Yan. Again po, yung mga may questions po, kindly just put them in our chat. You may send them privately to me or public dyan sa chat po. At kung kayo po ay nakikinig sa FB Live, feel free po to also send your questions there. Sige lang po. Okay, so ako po ang bibigay sa inyo ng question, Pastor Noel. So let me read. Meron na po tayong question ngayon. Hi, Pastor Noel. With all due respect, you have categorically dismissed those who have political apathy due to misapplication of divine sovereignty. What would be your take of political apathy and expressing voting abstention due to belief of a weak and non-optimal political and electoral system, while resting on divine sovereignty that despite the flaws in human mechanisms, abstainees can rest hope in God will eventually prevail nonetheless.
And with all due respect, what contributes to the weakness of the political machine in society are apathetic people who have the responsibility as well as the liberty to vote. And when they opt for not voting and their excuse is the weakness of the political system, that's precisely one of the components is because of voters who refuse to participate.
Okay, thank you. Sige po, you can send your questions.
Naalala ko yung, just to add, Pastor Exley.
Sige po.
Naalala ko during the snap elections, siguro bata pa marami sa inyo, in 1996, and there was this widespread idea that the elections will be rigged anyway, so what's the point of participating? So nagkaroon ng malawakang panawagan for boycott, and NAMFREL, which was the citizens' arm then, made a point, which is a quotation from the past, na it is better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. And I think voters who keep saying walang mangyayari, the political system is so rigged at wag na tayo mag-participate, I choose to light a candle, not curse the darkness.
Okay, Pas, meron din question, sabi dito, how about the leader from Western country? Walang sinabi specifically. How about the leader from Western country? Masasabi ba natin na mas mabuti sila kaysa po sa dalawang example na binigay ninyo na si Hitler and Putin?
If you weigh on the scale of what they have done to humanity in terms of cruelty, the ethnic cleansing that Hitler perpetrated against the Jews, with 6 million Jews known to have been killed cruelly, and of course now ongoing right before our eyes, war crimes that are attributed, of course, to Putin's idea of annexing Ukraine. I have my beef against some Western leaders, or ang sinabi the Western leader, if you're referring to America, I have my beef against his policies, but I will not classify him with Hitler or Putin in terms of cruel maltreatment of people, killing them. I think even the Bible does make a hierarchy of ethics, and in terms of that hierarchy, we should not make the mistake that many make na yung mga terrorists na lagi sinasabi ay, well, we do violence to their innocent citizens because they do violence to us by means of their oppressive policies. That is a very fallacious argument.
Pas, to add to that, yung ano po, kahit na hindi po sila as public katulad nila Hitler, pero po may policies like kunwari pro-choice. Ano po ba ang ano ninyo doon, position ninyo doon?
Well, of course, I'm against abortion in all its forms, except when the mother's life is in danger. And that's why I said I have my beef against the policies of especially progressives and woke ideology. I have written much against that, and my students in GMA know that my position is very much against that. But still, I will not put that put what they are doing or in person in terms of character in the category of what Hitler, or now in our lifetime Putin, what they are doing. But I am against, and I consider abortion to be a form of murder.
How about same-sex marriage din? Pastor, kasama na din doon, no? Pagdating doon sa pro-choice.
Yes, I do not believe in same-sex marriage. I do not believe in criminalizing homosexuality, by the way. I believe that to be one's individual choice, a choice of sin, and I do not believe that the state should criminalize that. However, I do not believe that the people's tax should be used to support a malfunctioning family in terms of rejection of what a family should be as father and mother.
All right, thank you. So another question, is it proper for professing Christians to openly endorse and vote for a candidate who is convicted by the Supreme Court?
Well, I know what you mean, and I have my own position. Ang point ko dito sa presentation is not to endorse a particular candidate or the opposite, to condemn another candidate, but to evoke a discussion among believers. So if you believe that that is something that should be considered, why not to vote for a particular candidate? That is your freedom. To others, the fact that there is no final conviction yet in terms ng Supreme Court criminal conviction, then that is something that they use as justification for their choice. So again, this forum is not to support a particular candidate or to condemn another. It is to evoke a discussion that is Christian as far as the spirit of conversation is concerned.
All right. Meron pa po tayong mga 20 to 25 minutes past. Marami naman pong mga questions na nagsesend sa akin. So meron po ngayon, sabi dito, should we vote for a candidate leader who is a Muslim who will protect religious rights of everyone than for a Christian who will forward Christian teaching to the whole nation?
Well, I made the point and I stand by it that the government leader is not there to promote any particular religion. The Christian leader is not for Christian mission. All that we want of the leader, of a government leader, is to safeguard liberty of conscience, freedom of religion. That is all that we ask, and leave to the church the advancing of the Christian faith. It is when the government intervenes, pag nang himasok ang pamahalaan, marami tayong siglo ng kasaysayan na ipinapakita kung anong resulta niyan, pang-uusig sa mga hindi sumasang-ayon o mga tinatawag nating non-conformists. So for a government to be espousing and advocating a religious promotion is going to be bad both for government and for the church. So voting even for a Muslim candidate who guarantees freedom of religion is not something that should deter us if we believe that he is true to his promise.
All right, thank you. Another one, is it right for a pastor to campaign his choice of candidate in his social media account? So kahit subtle or hindi man subtle, okay lang po ba yun sa pastor?
Well, let us distinguish between a pastor who is also a citizen and therefore has the right to vote and the right to promote what he believes to be good for his nation as a citizen. But he should not do it as a pastor to his church. He should not require his church either by compulsion or by pressure to vote in the way that he likes to vote. I mean, that is what I said in my lecture. It is wrong for a church to endorse, much less to field a candidate. And if the pastor is acting as a pastor representing his church, then it will be wrong for him. Just as I believe that a pastor becoming a candidate is wrong, no, he should make a choice. If he wants to be a candidate, he should leave the ministry. If he wants to be a pastor preaching the gospel, then 1 Corinthians 9:14 applies, that he should live of the gospel. But he cannot be both.
All right. Sige. Ito merong okay lang naman to mention the name of the candidate, no? Kasi kasama naman ito sa question niya. Right?
Yes.
So sabi po niya, I'm not gonna name na, sabi niya, hello Pastor Noel, I am voting for Lenny, not because I see her in a messianic way, but because I believe she has the competence among the presidential candidates and encourages democratic participatory governance. How can we avoid the discrimination that our patriarchal society puts on issues like women given equal opportunity in political leadership? Thank you.
Well, it is your right, of course, to dapat nga yun, sa pitch. You want to pitch for
Later,
by all means, that is your right and your freedom. But I think the argument that there is a bias against women in political leadership has already been disproved by the fact that we already have two women presidents, Cory Aquino and Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. The United States, 46 presidents now, still have not had any female president. So even by comparison, we only have 16, and nandito tayo na meron ng dalawa na kababaihan. So I do not believe that there is such a patriarchal bias when it comes to governance. But if you believe Lenny Robredo is the best candidate, it is your freedom, definitely.
All right. Another one pass. What is your stand po sa idea na choosing the other candidate as a vote, not for candidate A per se, but a vote against candidate B? Would you consider it a wise principle?
Well, I will vote my conscience, and probably whoever I vote by according to conscience will not win, but I'll sleep easier at night knowing that I voted for who I believe to be the right candidate, even if that candidate will lose ultimately. So I do not make it primary to vote against, but rather to vote for someone I believe to be the best.
Thank you. All right. What is your view regarding political donations or political contributions made by Christians to candidates that they trust to advance pro-Christian legislative agenda?
Well, first of all, again, as citizens, you have the right to support your candidate. But as I've said, it shouldn't be because the candidate is going to push a Christian agenda. The Christian agenda does not belong to the government. That has already been established even by Reformed confessions at the beginning. The Westminster Confession of Faith had something about the government being an instrument of advancing the Christian cause, and they too had to delete that in the 18th century because they, as the American experiment has shown, it is better to have a society where there is separation of church and state, and the state is not a tool of the church, and nor the church should depend on government for Christian mission. So I hope if you support a candidate, whether in the executive or legislative, it is not because of a Christian agenda, but because of the mandate of justice.
All right. Ito pas, this is I guess a continuation of the question about yung patriarchal society kanina, kasi maraming may iba-iba, even sa reform circles ay iba-iba ang view pagdating sa electing women sa position. So ang question niya, should this be what are your thoughts po on electing women to government positions? Is it actually wrong to elect women when there are other candidates who are men?
No, it is not wrong because the hierarchy of male leadership is in a covenant community, and that covenant community is the family, the household. That's Malachi chapter 2, and then the church is a covenant community because it is the household of God in 1 Timothy chapter 3. So the structure of male leadership applies to a covenant community. A nation state is not a covenant community. It is a society of voluntary membership, but one that is providentially put together in the same geography and history and culture. And in that situation, there is no covenant that is in place. And I believe that women may lead in a nation. I am an admirer of Margaret Thatcher as a very strong leader, and one who stood by her conservative values and who professed to be a Christian. And so I'm not against women leaders at all. And I believe very strongly in the equality of men and women.
Okay. So sa ecclesial, sa church, at sa family, doon po talaga kailangan yung meal, no? Doon po.
Opo.
No? Okay. Okay, thank you. So again, a follow-up question daw po, should this be minimum consideration for a Christian in his consideration for whom he should place his vote? All the rest of considerations we put to rest to God, whether may mga accusations pa, as long as Christians are not hindered in evangelism. I think siya yung nag-question yung kanina, Pas, yung if it's okay to vote for a Muslim rather than a Christian who will put forward or Christianize the government. So he has a follow-up question. Should this be minimum consideration for a Christian in his consideration for whom he should place his vote? All the rest of considerations we put to rest to God.
What is the minimum consideration na sinasabi?
Oo nga, pakiklaro naman. Sige, hintayin natin
The
siya.
minimum consideration is the agenda of justice. So I will examine the candidate's track record, his platform, his philosophical, his political philosophy, and those are things that will matter, that will bear upon my decision to vote for him. It will not be, as I've said, it will not be the religious profession of that person.
Okay, thank you. What is your response to those who saying that Christians should choose the lesser evil candidate, even the candidate is the least competent?
My students in ethics will know that I taught them the concept of hierarchy of ethics, and I said there, it is never right to do evil, even if you call it the lesser evil. If there are choices that collide, you choose the higher good. It's never the lesser evil. Now we are choosing among sinful candidates. All of us, all of them are sinful candidates, but you try to choose who you believe to be, in terms of track record, in terms of competence, in terms of political philosophy, those who you believe will advance the agenda of justice.
Question, Pas, paano kung GMA candidate ay GMA student yung nagtanong? Anyway, sige. Again, question. Hi, Pastor. Sorry, not sure if this was already asked or mentioned towards the end. The discussion was very helpful, especially among and between Christians as we guard our consciences. But my generic question would be, how can we come across this message to unbelievers, especially the part, quote, even the worst candidate will not be the devil, and even the best candidate will not be the Messiah, unquote, given that they do not have the same hope as we have. Most especially for human rights advocates, would it be the same approach as when we evangelize?
Well, that in fact becomes a very good opportunity for evangelism. You can pitch for your candidate, and if you have both the same candidates, then you can discuss very amicably. If you have two different candidates, then you can discuss with arguments on both sides, and that is what I believe a democracy should be, a society where contending ideas are to meet on the basis of persuasion. Now, that also becomes an opportunity to tell your friend na why, despite you are supportive of a candidate, you do not put your hope in that candidate in terms of actually solving all problems, nor do you believe in all the promises that they utter during the campaign, because many of these are messianic promises, but nonetheless, you still believe that it is right for you to support the candidate, and these are the reasons, but nonetheless, you always put that line of limit when you say, despite all this candidate will not solve all the problems because they are rooted in sin. And here is the only person who has the real hope that we should place, the only one on whom we should place our hope, and that is Jesus Christ. So that is an opportunity for evangelism, whether or not your friend has the same candidate as you have or a different candidate.
May question din pass na sabi dito, siya daw ay na belittle ng isang Kristiyano and his character was publicly, her character was public, she was she was belittled by a Christian dahil daw sa kanyang sinusuport na kandidato. Ang question niya, does she need to stand up for myself about what I believe in reply sa atake niya, or should I just keep mum, tumahimik?
You don't need to keep mum, but you can remain meek, meaning you do not retaliate in terms of the same cutting remarks or language or belittling, contemptuous language. This is why, gaya ng sinabi ni Pastor Exley sa house rules natin, ay to show that Christians can have different positions on a political issue. This is a political issue. That does not make a person supporting the opposite candidate a heretic. The person you may question his political position, and it is your right to do that. But as Christians, let us avoid contemptuous language, because even if a person is supporting a candidate that you believe to be the wrong candidate, that does not make it heretical.
Kasi parang madami din na nagsasabi na just because you are choosing a certain candidate, nakatie-in daw yung moralidad mo, parang ganun. So mali pong sabihin yun, tama po ba?
Mali, dahil sinabi ko nga, dito nagkakaroon ng the peril of becoming so engrossed with politics that we blur gospel issues. Whatever they stand for, they are not advancing gospel issues. And I don't think any candidate has made a position that once they become president, they will stop the Christian mission. So the gospel mission continues whoever wins.
Okay. Alright, ito magandang tanong, Pas. Kasalanan po bang iboto ang kandidato na alam nating publicly, as in sinasabi niya sa kanyang mga interview, ay siya ay pro-choice, siya ay pro same-sex marriage, despite of their excellence in leadership?
Again, we are talking here of politics. One of the considerations ng politics ay what are the good things that this candidate may be able to push through, and what are bad things that he may be advocating but will not be able to push through. For example, if I vote for someone who is pushing for same-sex marriage, but I know for a fact that it will not win. I mean, the advocacy has no chance of winning because we're still, the Catholic Church, for whatever we may say about the Catholic Church, it is a very strong safeguard of morality to our country. And so this was tried in the last Congress and failed miserably. And I believe that I can vote for a candidate whose advocacy may be same-sex marriage, but I know that the advocacy will not prevail, but that candidate may be advocating other good things that I believe in. So that's politics. As they say, politics is the art of compromise, not compromising doctrines, but compromising certain political positions in order to get ahead with other good things.
As yung sabi niya, how should we respond specifically to pastors, not only who are very expressive with their candidate, which leads to demeaning or worse, canceling Christians voting the other side. Minsan daw nagli-lead na to slander itong ibang pastor, sabi nung nagtatanong. How do we respond to them daw po?
pushing for a candidate by a pastor exercising his right as citizen, I believe even a pastor can support a candidate and may push for a candidate as a citizen. But as a pastor, he should not be pushing for a candidate. His mandate is to preach the Lord Jesus Christ, the gospel. So one thing I want to say, political advocacy has no place in the pulpit except for illustrative factors, but not for proclamation.
All right. Okay, so ito papas, your take po, ano po yung take ninyo if the winning candidate is not the one you voted and expressed your intent not to support his or her government? Is it a defiance of Romans chapter 12? Should Christians be compelled to submit?
Christians have the duty to submit. It's not that they are being compelled. If they are Christians, they should believe in the providence of God. Whoever wins, as I've said in my lecture, whoever wins, and you may think that the worst person wins the elections, he will not be worse than Nero. And yet, Apostle Paul in Romans 13 called for submission even to a government that at the top of which was one of the most wicked men that ever ruled in the Roman Empire. So just because he's not your candidate does not justify defiance of government. That's the position of the Pharisees when they asked, is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? And of course, they were very much against Caesar. And then I do not also support blind loyalty, which the Herodians had when they asked the same question. They were together in asking that question to Jesus. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? And when Jesus asked for someone to show him the coin, it was to show that they were using the Roman coin, which means that they were benefiting from government. And so why would they defy a government from which they benefit? And the answer of Jesus, as I've said, is an answer of wisdom, of genius. Render to Caesar the things which belong to Caesar. And so whoever wins, we are duty bound as Christians to submit. Not that we accept every policy, not that we are forbidden from speaking against certain policies or actuations of government, but in terms of the authority which is legitimately possessed through elections, then it is right. It is not only right, it is the duty of Christians to submit.
Sige, may follow-up po doon, pero I think would be beneficial po kasi pagka natanong ito. So kapag naluklok po yung kandidato na yon at may mga certain policies naman na pwedeng hindi mag-agree ang mga Kristiyano, kapag may mga policies, for example, that would hinder the church, for example, sa pag-worship, is it something na kailangan ay mag-submit daw po ang mga Kristiyano din?
Ay, kung ang kanyang patakaran ay manghihimasok sa mga mandato ng iglesia, doon tayo dapat maging handa na magsakripisyo alang-alang sa ating pananampalataya. So diyan papasok ang Acts 5:29 when they were commanded by the Sanhedrin, the equivalent of the Supreme Court, no longer to preach the name of Jesus. And Peter said, we would rather obey God than men. But I do not think any of the candidates will come to that point of having a policy that is anti-Christian. And this is one of the positive contributions of the fact that we are still Roman Catholic dominated. I'm not endorsing the doctrines of the Roman Catholic Church. I also teach Roman Catholicism, both history and theology. in GMA. So it is not out of support for the Roman Catholic Church, but out of recognition of the positive contribution to the national morality in our present politics.
Okay. So another question, it says here, some people say one's choice of candidate reflects his or moral standard. In other words, choosing a candidate is a moral choice. They use this to justify cutting ties with people who support candidates who they believe violate their moral standards. What is the Christian response to this?
Where would you stop? I mean, if you cut fellowship because of politics, then you will also cut fellowship because they are patronizing a particular mall or a particular store, or where will you stop? That's the tragedy of making fellowship stand on politics. Our fellowship stands on a greater foundation than political. So the politics here in the Philippines may be weak, and I am part of those at my age who had been frustrated by the kind of politics we have from the time that I was born, during my in the year of my birth, under the makapagal, not Gloria, but just Dado Makapagal administration, until the present administration. It has been like an uninterrupted segue of corruption, and yet it will not be the foundation of my Christian position and fellowship with fellow believers. So napakababaw naman kung puputulin mo ang fellowship sa kapwa mananampalataya dahil sinusuportahan niya ang ganitong kandidato. Ganyan ba kababaw ang ating fellowship? Sana ay hindi. Mas malalim pa ang fellowship natin kaysa kung sino ang namamahala.
So another one, it says, I think one of the biggest issues in 2022 elections is the widespread propaganda that promotes historical revisionism and disinformation. How should we protect our conscience and choice from being shaped by the misinformation machinery that is so prevalent in social media nowadays?
Upon the when the news hit that Elon Musk was going to own Twitter 100%, I reactivated my Twitter account after my last tweet of 2016. I put a tweet in which I said that free speech is anchored in the conviction that truth is more powerful than fake news. So we overcome fake news by truth, and therefore it should thrive in persuasion. He who cancels is the one who cannot persuade. So kung sasabihin mo fake news yan, so tanggalin ng account, tanggalin ng that is not my belief. I believe in free speech, and free speech is most challenged when you do not agree with the one speaking or with the one posting. You overcome it by truth. And that's all we ask, even in gospel preaching. We do not want to have a law that forbids the Jehovah's Witnesses or the cults. We just want them to be free, just as we are free, because we want for there to be a free marketplace of ideas, because we are so confident in the truth that we hold. And when that truth is given free course, it will overcome error.
Okay. So Pas, ano ang inyong Twitter handle?
Do you mean
It's username. I-chat nyo na lang daw. Anyway, Sabi dito, it has been common for social media posts to mention the conflict of someone attending or is a member of a church yet supporting a candidate proven and convicted to be a violator of the law. How do you view and react to such posts po?
Again, it is their freedom. The idea na you cancel, what if those who are promoter of falsehood are in power and they do the same? Then you get canceled. It will just become a cycle of whoever is in power. It will not be justice. This is called victor's justice, where whoever is victorious, ang mauusig ay kung sino yung natalo. Ayaw natin ng ganun. Sino man manalo, matalo, everybody should be given freedom of expressing their ideas. Now, what is the limitation is, while everybody is free to believe what they want to believe, not everybody can act on their belief. Precisely because if he believes that it's good, human sacrifice is a good way to worship God, and they begin sacrificing humans, so they can believe what they like, but they cannot act on it. So, yun ang point na they can believe and they can express what they believe, but if that includes violence, then they cannot act on their belief. But cancellation is the option of the coward because he has no confidence in his position. Christians have confidence in their position.
Okay. Pas, siguro dalawang question na lang before we take our break. Yung question na to is siguro continuation ng about dun sa worship. Is it not an intrusion to the church if the government limit us to a certain percentage to our worship service because of a pandemic?
Well, we must understand that there are times when it is a matter if the government, which has the resources to determine that a particular situation is a hazard, hindi lang naman sa atin nagsimula yan. Even the Puritans, many Puritans had to cancel their worship services. Some have fled London during a time of epidemic. And ibig sabihin, parang bago sa atin kasi nasa lifetime natin nangyari. Pero look at history, hindi ito bago. May mga pangyayari na in which even churches were forced to suspend their assemblies for the good of the neighbor. Now, those were times when there was no equipment on the part of the government to determine the situation of health hazard. And we are in a situation where the government has the means to determine health hazard. Now, I know that government can go to excess, as in fact America has done. But for as long as we are convinced that the hazard is there and it will be for the good of neighbor to restrict the assemblies of the church for the meantime, I have nothing against that. And we have the means to continue our worship services now, even without the assembly. But I believe that the assembly is the designed way of worshiping God. Therefore, online worship is a disruption, not a substitution for assembly.
Thank you, Pas. Ito, question, how can it be if all of the candidates are giving messianic promises? Kasi po nabanggit nyo kanina yung mga nagbibigay ng mga promises na parang magkakaroon ng utopia. So paano daw po ba? Ano daw ang pwede niyong gawin kung mukhang ganun ng mga promises?
Gaya ng sinabi ko, hindi masamang suportahan mo pa rin ang kandidato as long as you discern that some of his promises are just messianic and will not happen. You see, one of the reasons for disenchantment with government is because candidates overpromise and the electorate over-expect.
Mm.
And when the two collide, talagang there will be disenchantment with government. So always bear in mind, what is the mandate of government? The mandate of government is justice, safeguard the equality of all and the equal opportunity for all. This is the reason why the Declaration of Independence by the founding fathers of America made the inalienable rights spelled out in terms of right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Now, hindi nila sinabing right to life, liberty, and happiness. The government cannot guarantee you that. What we want the government to guarantee is our ability to pursue happiness. If you are not happy because you're not pursuing it in a responsible way, that the blame is on you, not on government. But we are so bred in a society where everything is dependent on government, and that is calculated to make people blame the government for every ill, and that is because of their irresponsibility. So that is perhaps one take that we all should have from this forum, is to make sure we believe that we can be pursuing that which will be for our meaningful life if we pursue what is according to the will of God, and government can never guarantee that. All we want government to do is give us a space of justice, and then we can exercise our responsibility.
As very last question na lang po.
Okay.
Should a Christian professing legislator be rebuked if he or she was found to be in strong support of a law that go against biblical prescriptions?
Well, I would like to know what particular law we're talking about, because if it is a law that has to do with the church mission, that is not for the government to impose as a legislation or as an executive order or whatever instrument of government there may be. I maintain that Christian mission is for the church to advance, not the government. So sa Amerika noon, pinupush yung public prayer as though it is the responsibility of government to make a prayer for people. It is the responsibility of the family. It is the responsibility of parents to have a household where there is prayer. And if there is none in the household, you cannot make the government make a prayerful citizenry.
All right. Sige. Thank you so much, Pastor Noel.
So, I hope na ito pong video na ito ni Pastor Noel ay nakatulong sa atin, sa ating pag-iisip, na sana po ay ipag-pray natin na maging tama ang ating mga desisyon, at binigyan tayo ng mga mahalagang prinsipyo ang ating iboboto sa darating na halalan, kung sino man ang mananalo. No? We are not voting for the devil, and we are at the same time, we are not voting for the Messiah. So kung ang mananalo ay yung gustong-gusto natin, tandaan natin, hindi siya Messiah. No? Hindi siya ang ating pag-asa. Ang pag-asa natin ay ang Panginoon. At higit sa lahat, ang mensahe na dala ng ating iglesia at ang mensahe ng mga totoong mananampalataya ay napakahalaga, napakataas at eternal kaysa sa mensahe ng mga politiko na pang ilang taon lamang. Okay? Manalangin tayo. Panginoon Diyos, salamat po sa paggamit mo kay Pastor Noel Espinosa para makapag-minister sa amin dito sa church, although nakapag-minister na rin siya sa iba't ibang mga churches, not only in the Philippines but around the world, in this video that he shared to us. And so we thank you, Lord, na binigyan mo kami ng ganitong opportunity. We have this freedom to really think on our own. No? Salamat po sapagkat Sa ibang bansa, they have no freedom to think on their own. Na andun ang mga namumuno na sinosuppress ang kalayaan ng marami. At salamat po, we're still enjoying that here in our country. At nagpapasalamat din kami na because of this freedom that we enjoy, we can still live and do our responsibility as Christians, especially in reaching out people for the gospel, in preaching the gospel, in proclaiming the real need of man, salvation through the Lord Jesus Christ. Marami pong salamat. I-bless niyo rin po yung aming maikling break and then ang aming pong worship service this morning and even this afternoon. Ito ang aming dalangin sa ngalan ni Jesus. Amen. Okay, mag-break po muna tayo.